Chess kids, welcome back to YouTube. Prepare to have a smile on your face for the next 8 minutes because you're about to watch a never before seen FunMaster Mike game from my youth, from my ChessKid days. What have I told you always on ChessKid? Don't move your F-pawn without my written permission. And what did my opponent do? Well, there was no ChessKid back then. Sorry for him, but he played F4. Now, I know you're thinking FunMaster starts with an F, moving your F-pawn starts with an F. Well, it's only fun if you're the person against the F-pawn. So my opponent played F4. This technically has a name. It's called the Birds opening, but it's for the birds. Don't play it. I played E5. It's called the Fram Gambit. And what I did was sacrifice a pawn and oh baby. If my opponent plays knight C3, I get to be the hero of all heroes. I get to sacrifice my queen for a checkmate on move number 6. Now, I don't think somebody that plays the birds would fall into that. So the attack is not over just because my opponent sees the queen h4 idea. In fact, we're just getting started. Now, knight f3 guards h4. However, where there's a will, there's a way. The most aggressive way to play this gambit as black, it's called Fram's Gambit, is to play g5. And you can see the idea. It's pretty forceful. I'm going to kick the knight, and I'm going to play my checkmate anyway. That's the big plan. So my opponent played g3, further blocking this diagonal, but I'm not done. Quick development move. My opponent played c3, okay, guarding this square. But now I need to get this pawn off the board if I'm going to give checkmate. So I played h5. I know it looks crazy, and it is kind of crazy, but you know what? If your opponent moves the f-pawn, you can do some weird things like push pawns on the side of the board. My opponent played d4, and here we go. g4, kicking the knight. The knight went to the square g5, and I thought, okay, h4. Now I'm threatening to just take, and I can either take the rook, or I can play bishop takes, either one of which is winning. So my opponent slid the rook off of the pile. Pawn takes, and here we get to have some real fun. Why don't you pause your YouTube video and figure out what really fun move FunMaster Mike played next as black. Well, if you're back, you've already found the fun. I didn't actually say winning, I just said fun. So actually, this was kind of a little fair play check. If you plug this in a computer, the computer won't agree with my move. But from a practical situation, it actually worked pretty well. I want to take this pawn so bad, my bishop getting to that diagonal has been my only thought for the first 10 moves of the game, that I played the deflection move rook h1. Now, why do I say a computer is not going to help you find the move? Because a computer is a super genius and actually finds a refutation. I say refutation, but my opponent would have to be such a genius into capturing this rook. But here's the point. If he does capture the rook, obviously I can take. And the point is I would force the king onto the diagonal that blocks the bishop's protection. So I would take. Now I've already got 4 points to my rook. And when the king walks, I can give any sort of check I want on this diagonal. It could be the queen or the bishop. I was thinking probably the queen. Now here's the refutation. My opponent would have to see all this even before taking my rook. My opponent could play e4, only move. You play anything else, you lose. If you play king here, knight a5 leads to complete destruction. If you block with the queen, bishop f5 leads to complete destruction. Now e4 looks like a blunder because after I take, I actually thwart the king and the rook, but my opponent has the brilliant bishop d3. But the chances of my opponent finding all that weren't that great. And even here, the game is still interesting. I do have connected pass pawns on the king side. But anyway, if we go back to rook h1, let's just pretend that this was played before the computer age, which it was. And the theme of my idea, I think, was right. My opponent did chicken out and play rook to g2. And now I'm just completely winning because what do we do to pin pieces? The bishop's pinned. We put pp on the pp. And if you're just hearing that for the first time, it means put pressure on the pinned piece. If you were thinking of something else, shame on you. Queen to f6, very simple. I'm about to simply capture the bishop, and there's no good defense. Don't believe me? Rook over, bang! My bishop gets to its heroic square, and the game is over. All right? If my opponent plays knight to d2 to guard, well, that blocks the bishop's protection of the knight, and I simply take the knight, get my piece, and I'm up a piece, and white's not developed, and I'm going to win. Okay? What my opponent actually played in the game was bishop to f4 to block, but of course I simply just took the bishop. And if my opponent takes back, well, it's pretty easy to see. Queen takes, forks the knight and the bishop, and I'm going on to win. What actually happened in the game was knight to e4. Clever idea, right? Now I played queen to f5. and eventually won the game. However, there's this funny little move which was even better, queen h6. In this position, if my opponent plays takes, I have a fantastic tactic. I can take the bishop, and after takes back, queen check. You can't lose your queen, so you have to block with your rook, but then queen takes knight, and I've won 2 minor pieces for the rook. And if we go back, just going to show you one more variation. If my opponent moves the knight back, and suddenly, I've got the rook and I've got the bishop in danger. Bishop c1. My black bishop has taken the place of where the white bishop usually is. And now when my opponent takes my rook, I can play bishop takes, winning the rook back and the knight's in danger. It is a super fun game. And just goes to show you, chess kids, I'm not lying. If you pushed your F pawn against the Fun Master, I'm the only one that's going to have fun. My opponent did not have my written permission. Well, there was no Fun Master back then, but in any case, I went on to win the game in a very fun fashion, and I'll never forget. Go ahead and click that subscribe button for more Fun Master Mike magic here on YouTube.